I have over 100 hours in Hellclock 2.0 and the Cursed War DLC. And so today, I'm going to do a quick wrap up of the best builds that I've played, all of which can be scaled to tier 16, thus completing the hardest content in the game. I've played minion builds that one tap the screen, basically you're killing enemies before you see them. Spark, fill the screen with projectiles, don't even need to aim, and you're super tanky. Oh, and a build that drops meteors from the sky, because why not hit the entire screen with one meteor? And so that, let's get right into it. Starting with Tupa's Wrath. This is a new skill added with the DLC that's basically Spark from Path of Exile. You fire projectiles that erratically bounce around levels, so no aiming required. And while the projectiles themselves cannot shotgun, after a short duration they can hit the same enemy again. And thanks to the new belt of a cowboy, this build gets super tanky due to a massive conviction pool and absurd conviction recovery. And with the new all skills mode, you can level it starting in Act 1. This is especially nice because unlike many of the other builds on this list, it does not require any build enabling uniques during the early campaign. So the core of the build is Belt of the Cowboy. This is a new unique relic which triggers when you take damage, giving you a portion of your evasion rating as conviction. So if you have like 100,000 conviction, 75% agility rating, you're going to get around 50,000 conviction back every time you're hit, at least within the 2-second cooldown. Meaning the build is super tanky. It takes a lot to kill you when you're getting 25,000 conviction returned per second. In addition, I'm using Mondok's Air Orb for damage scaling. This provides a whole bunch of resistance shred, along with a massive amount of lightning damage, when the cooldown reduction, aka cast speed, is also quite nice. While this is a rare item, you certainly don't need it early on. This is more of something that you add when you're making the push from tier 12 up to tier 16. A few additional ways to scale your build include Written Promise. This turns your conviction into damage. Calcite Necklace, so you can scale off of both physical and lightning modifiers. Plenty of rare affixes, including some that give base damage to Tupa's Wrath, or spell damage against shocked enemies. And of course, to make you even tankier, constellations that give both conviction and conviction recovery. If you want to know more about leveling this build or playing it in the endgame, check out my build guide, which will be up in the card and down below. Also, if you want to see more Hellclock build from me, do be sure to get subscribed and maybe leave a like while you're down there. But what about minion builds? Well, thanks to the new Nightmare relics, those got a big buff as well. For example, Plague Repeater is now a minion build. You can kill a single enemy and watch as the entire pack explodes. If you're in a high density area, those explosions will even chain to additional packs, wiping them out before they even enter your screen. And then for single target damage, instead of having to shoot enemies yourself, now you can just drop machine gun minions, they'll wither bosses and melt them in seconds. The core of a build is Last Prayer. This adds explosions when Repeater kills enemies. You could actually use this starting in Act 1, but by default, Repeater is physical damage, so you're going to need something to convert it over to Plague to be able to scale both your Repeater and the Plague explosions. In addition, you can use Arapuka. This gives Repeater a large damage bonus against slowed enemies. Luckily, Plague damage inflicts Blighted, which slows enemies. And then how do you put all of this on minions? The new Infested Weapons Nightmare relic. If you want to know how to farm that, check out my farming guide. Now, instead of attacking yourself, though that's something you still can do if you want to, you cast Phantom Marksman, which attack by using Repeater. This also unlocks new scaling options. For example, you could use Future Weapon, so your Repeater bounces between more enemies, making it even easier to clear with. Headless Doll and Call the Guard give you a massive amount of minion damage. Alternatively, you can use the new Scorched Bones, but more about that in future builds. Then there's Unwieldy Weapon, which turns Repeater into a bit of a shotgun, dealing more damage, but causing it to have a spread pattern. Cast your minions directly on enemies and they'll fire at point-blank range, completely negating the downside. Last up, there's a couple of important constellations to consider. Uxosi gives a massive number of marksman bonuses, including 4 stacking agility orbs, something that you generally want to be doing. Osane, on the other hand, converts the physical damage into Plague. This way, you can scale not only your Repeater, but also the Last Prayer explosions. I had a lot of fun with the original Plague Repeater back in 1.1, it got buffed in 1.2, and sure enough, it's buffed again in 2.0. So if you like explosions, this is the build for you, and again, you can check out my full build guide up in the card and down below. Let's say you just want something that's really easy to play. You don't have to think much, just equip a couple of things and go. Well, in that case, I recommend Plague Splitshot, because it's a build that you can play starting in Act 1 and continue using all the way through Tier 16 Endless Nightmares, aka the game's hardest content. It is another minion build, so starting in Act 2, all you have to do is pick up loot while your minions automatically kill everything for you. The core of the build is combining the new Nightmare Relic Plague Bullet, which converts Splitshot's damage to Plague and causes the bullets to bounce instead of pierce, Blunderbuss, so you no longer have to stand close to enemies, instead it's one powerful slug that bounces through enemies, and Stolen Weapons to give that powerful slug that does plague damage to your minions. For damage scaling, you can of course use Call of the Guard and Headless Doll. You're going to have quite a few minions, so this is free damage scaling. You can also use Scorched Bones. Cast Tupa's Wrath and hit your minions. This will buff them, multiplicatively increasing their damage and their attack speed, so a buff that basically double dips on itself. Now, because Splitshot is a marksman skill, you can of course use Uxosi, a marksman constellation, and you can throw in a conversion constellation, while not strictly required, using either Osane for physical or Iriko for lightning, gives you access to extra damage affixes, making it a lot easier to scale your build. And if you're completely new to Hellclock, I recommend Plague Splitshot over everything else on the list. Not only is it one of the most powerful builds that I've played in 2.0, but it's also very easy to play. You don't have to worry about the nuances of something like Mondok's Orb. You also don't have to worry about constantly recasting your minions. The Catholic Guards are permanent, they just follow you around doing damage. And you don't have to worry about some of the Ignite or Ailment stuff that you might with other builds. In the words of Todd Howard, it just works. But now I want to talk about a campaign build, specifically an Ignite build, taking advantage of the fact that Ignite got massive buffs in 2.0, because Oiled is no longer removed when you're dealing damage, the new Holy Fire, aka Fireball skill that clears very easily, and of course Matadera that drops massive ignites on bosses. Now, if you want to play this build, all the way from Act 1 through the endgame clear the hardest content, I have done that. But where it really shines is going through the campaign. This was not only my fastest campaign clear in 2.0, but also the least number of attempts that it took me to clear the campaign. That's because of Crimson Sword, which buffs Holy Fire by giving it additional projectiles that explode outwards when it strikes an enemy. This way you don't have to worry about piercing, you'll clear the pack automatically, because each of those projectiles can also explode. And Poem Never Recited, so that you can apply Oiled to enemies by judging them or dropping slow time. Oiled is a debuff that triples Ignite damage. Very good on Ignite builds. After that, you have things like Teriri's Law. Not only does this buff Ignite damage, but it automatically collects loot for you, which is quite nice. Crimson Flower, as long as you're a non-crit build, which this is, it provides a stacking damage buff. Small Coffee, buffing Matadera, and General Fire damage scaling, which is available on several new rare relics. Because of the auto loot from Teriri's Law, this is a great farming build. Basically, dot up enemies, run past, they will die behind you, and the loot will fly to your current location and be automatically collected. If you want to scale it into the endgame, what you have to do is add Mondok's Fire Orb. In this case, both to remove crit chance and to provide a massive amount of fire damage. Unfortunately, the cooldown reduction doesn't really help here, as you don't need to cast faster, you just need to ignite something once and then move on to the next pack. Both a campaign and endgame video will be up in the card and down below. Then, last but not least, I want to talk about my Skyhammer Dash Ignite build. Because why use regular Ignite when you can use insane ticks for trillions of damage Ignite? And also, why worry about stopping to cast things when you can dash through enemies, which has no cooldown, and drop infinite meteors on their heads? So, this build is not easy to put together. It has a huge amount of variables, some of which require you to pay attention to things like crit chance. But it is awesome when it comes together. It completely annihilates the hardest content in the game, to the point where you can speed farm without buying Blessings of Foundation. The core is of course my Skyhammer. This triggers Matadera on critical strike, and turns Matadera into a melee skill, meaning it can trigger itself. So how do we trigger it? Shadow Dash, which is converted over to melee thanks to Death Worship, and thanks to rare relic affixes, has no cooldown. So now the playstyle is simple. Dash through levels, meteors drop, enemies die. For damage scaling, this uses all of the most broken things. Well, except for Minion, but don't worry, Ignite is just as broken as Minions, as is Mondok's Fire Orb. which provides a massive amount of damage. Just make sure that you get as much crit chance as possible without actually capping out. If you cap out, you don't get the res shred from Mondox. But if you don't have enough crit, you're not going to be dropping enough meteors. Then, Bottle of Oil applies oil, since Shadow Dash still does physical damage, it's there as a support skill, not a damaging skill. Tereri's Law and Small Coffee, these provide a multiplicative damage boost. Zango means you can use either fire or lightning damage modifiers, making it far easier to scale the build. And since this is a crit build, Boitada means when dealing a critical strike, your Ignite is going to scale off of your critical damage. Then, last but not least, Yaki's Pipe plus Yaki Yatere combine to give you screen clearing AoE. Again, why hit one enemy when you can hit every enemy on the screen? This is very much a gear-intensive maximalist endgame build. I do not recommend playing it early, but once you get the gear, it feels so good to play. Just dashing through enemies, it's one of the fastest builds I've ever played in Hellclock. The damage is so high that it's the perfect place to make a Magic Find build, dropping offensive or in some cases even defensive stats to get more things like gold gain, soulstone gain, and relic drop, then of course farming anything that you want. So if you want to play the ultimate Hellclock build, check out my video up in the card and down below. And so those are the best builds that I've played in Hellclock 2.0 and the Curse War DLC. I wanted to include a mix of things that both do and don't require DLC skills. If you want to play the Ignite campaign build, you're going to need the DLC. Same if you're playing Tupa's Wrath. While you do need the Journey of Nightmares for things like Plague Repeater and Plague Splitshot, you don't actually need the DLC. And if you want to play Skyhammer, while it's very gear intensive, again, the DLC isn't required, and it doesn't use any of the DLC skills either. So, whether you're a beginner playing Hellclock for the first time, or a veteran looking to play the best build possible, there's something for everyone here. Before I go, I did want to give one honorable mention to Veil of Quills. There's a new way to play it with a single lightning projectile that rapidly dashes through enemies. The main reason that I didn't include it in this video, it's using a lot of the same scaling as Plague Repeater. You're converting that lightning damage back to Plague. You're using infested weapons, and having your Phantom Marksman generate Veil of Quill projectiles on Repeater hit. So think of this as Plague Repeater, but instead of doing Plague Explosion and Repeater scaling stuff, you are doing Trigger Veil of Quills on hit and spell scaling stuff. That said, it's still a good build that I absolutely recommend. And so now I'm curious, if you've been playing Hellclock 2.0, what's the best build you played? Or, barring that, what's your favorite? And if you haven't played yet, which of the builds that I've talked about today look most interesting to you? These have been the things that I've played, and I've had a good time with all of them. But of course, I'm looking forward to hearing from you down in the comments. If you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out some of my build guides for all of the builds. I've linked as many as I can up in the card, the rest will be down in the pinned comment because unfortunately, I can only link 5 things into cards. That's also where I'll put my Hellclock farming guide in case you're wondering how to get a Nightmare Relic, or how to farm for some of our rarer things like my Skyhammer or Mondox Orb. I've had a ton of fun with Hellclock 2.0, but this is probably where my journey comes to an end, at least for this season. I played for over 100 hours, made a bunch of builds, had a good time, but I think it's time to move on. That said, I'm definitely going to be covering Hellclock in the future, so don't forget to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and with that, good luck on your farming, and I'll see you in the next one.